Let's see if we can make someone hungry by the end of this tag. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Chris and today's video is the book buffet tag. This tag was originally invented by Amrita. By the book, I'll put their video down below, and I caught it over on Jake the Bookish Drummer's channel when he did it a little while ago, and I thought, hey, that sounds like a fun tag. I'm gonna take that one for myself and tag. So this one is all about food and books. The questions are all related to food, and I'm very lucky that I had lunch before I sat down to film this video, otherwise I would be quite hungry. There are 8 prompts in this tag, and then prompt number 9 is to tag some friends. So let's jump into the book buffet tag. Question number 1. The Appetizer, a short story novelette or novella that you wish could be expanded into a full-length novel or get a novel-length sequel. Personally, I haven't read a whole lot of novellas that didn't then go on to be a series or weren't like a prequel after a first book had been released, but I have read a couple of short story collections. The short story I want to mention comes from the Joe Hill short story collection called Full Throttle, and the story is called Late Returns. Late Returns is a story about a guy who basically is a bit down on his luck and needs a job, so he goes into a library and gets a job as a driver of a library van, sort of like a semi-trailer or a caravan that has a library in the back, sort of like an ice cream truck. He stops along the way when people hail him down to hire a book out of this library. But what we realize eventually through that story is that these people have passed away and they're coming into this library truck for one last read, and there are reasons, very specific reasons, that they are looking for books within a library truck. I thought the whole premise was really cool, and I could easily read a whole novel on that premise, and it would lend itself to a variety of different genres. This is a little bit atmospheric and a little bit creepy, which I thought was cool for quite a wholesome story, really, and I had a good time with it, and I would definitely read a full story based on Late Returns. The next prompt is the salad bar. Pick 3 ingredients, plot elements, writing style, tropes, etc. that would be in your ideal book salad. Now for this, I've broken it down to 3 parts of a salad. I've got the salad base, what gives it substance. I have the healthy bits, the bits you put on the top that you have to eat out of obligation, and then the fun bits, like, bread and croutons. So what gives it a little pizzazz? Starting off with the salad base. Lettuce, spinach, arugula, if you will. The base of a really good book for me has got to be world building. I've said it here time and time again. I am a world building sucker. That definitely has to be the biggest element in my ideal book. I really enjoy books that have a world that feels huge, or a world that feels really full, really lush, but maybe we only get to see a little bit of that world, but what we see has this potential to be expanded upon in other books. I also love when we get a world that we get to discover as the characters adventure through the book, and there are authors that are quite skilled in the show rather than tell of a world as we traverse through the lands, different terrains, perhaps even different countries, and get feels for different areas of this world. 2 books that I want to shout out here are Blood of the Spear by Mark Timoney. Went through a few different terrains and different areas, got to meet some cool monsters and get some histories and lore of those particular areas that we were going through. Now, it has been criticized as having some lore dumps, and yeah, it does have some lore dumps, but to me, that built the world and made it feel much bigger in scope. And the other shout out I want to give is to the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Now, book 1 was fairly small in terms of world building, but what the series did was really expand upon each book in that series, just made this world bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was really, really well done in my opinion. Moving on to those healthy vegetables that you chuck in a salad, like your tomatoes, your carrots, your red onions, you know what I'm talking about, you get the idea. For me, this is all about plot. So a good plot, or even a simple plot that's well executed, coupled with world building, makes for a delightful salad. Personally, I love a plot that is more complex than it initially seams, or even just being chucked into a plot that we have to figure out. But in terms of a simple plot that gets bigger and gets more complex, it draws the reader in, it lets them feel comfortable with why we are there in this world, but then opens up and makes the reader question what's going to happen next and what the complexities are within this plot. I definitely want to couple some excellent world building with a simple but effective plot that can get more complex over time. A couple of mentions for this would be Voice of War by Zach Argyle. Plot fairly simplistic in premise, but as you move through the book, realize that it is much more complicated than we initially thought. And also The World of Lunaria by L.L. McRae, starting with Marauder. Simplistic plot for the first book, but damn does it have potential to really blow out and be way more complex than we initially thought. Moving on to the fun stuff that I just generally enjoy in a salad, like croutons or parmesan. I don't know, you get the idea. I really enjoy a multi-POV book. Even if we're going through the same timeline but seeing it from different perspectives, I think that is one of my favorite things to read. Now this can be a little bit tricky, it can be a double-edged sword, particularly for new authors, putting in a lot of POVs into a book where it gets too complicated, but there is a sweet spot for POVs, and I really enjoy seeing a world from different perspectives. Now, a couple of examples I'm going to give for this one is Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. This is a dual POV. We only really have two, and each of those characters has essentially the same amount of page time, but we get to see different areas being built up through different perspectives and really get into why they don't like the other one and why they think their view is correct. The other one that I want to read is a little bit of a gentler fantasy, even though there are definitely some dark undertones, is City of Dusk by Tara Sim. This one follows 4 families and 4 POVs, all going through the same timeline. This book was a lot of fun, and having those 4 different POVs and perspectives gave it a lot of depth. Question 3, we have the Dosa Station, a slim volume that packs a significant punch. Now for this question, I am going to delve into the horror sphere of things, where we get some really excellent novellas in the abstract horror and just horror genres in general. I'd like to shout out Weird and Other Derelictions for this book. This is by Adam Novell. This book is a collection of very short stories. It may even be classed as a novelette, I'm not sure. But it's essentially, the premise is, each short story is, we're in a world without humanity. Humans have completely gone, it is void of human life. And we, as the reader, are sort of invited to understand why that is and put it together for ourselves, with each story being a little bit different and a little bit of a different situation that we're sort of viewing, almost in like a bird's eye cinematic view. And it was the only book of its kind that I've ever read, and I still think about it, even though I read it well over 12 months ago now, it is still one of my favorite horrors that I've ever read. Very atmospheric. It felt like you were watching a cinematic opening to an epic movie as you were reading each and every story, and I had such a good time with it. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I'll put the link to it down in the description box below. Question number 4, Pasta, a book that brings you comfort and leaves you fully satisfied and content when you're done with it. For that one, I'm going to have to shout out Dreams of the Dying by Nicholas Lietzow. This is not a warm and fuzzy book by any means. This deals with some very heavy mental health themes and depression throughout the entire book, and there's a lot of commentary on mental health and the stigma around it, as well as working through it. But this book is so complete in itself, particularly for a self-published book as well. This world feels full, the plot is excellent, the characters are great, and it could easily be read as a standalone, even though the author is working on book 2 at the moment. It's chunky, it is 800 pages long, but it is one of the only books of this length that I thought, yeah, that page count justified what this story was, and I had a very, very good time with it. And in terms of feeling full and complete, this is the book that comes to mind. Question number 5, Beef, a book that is hearty, whether it's long, fills you up with gooey warmth, or was just a slog to get through. For this, I'm going to say The Sword of Kaigen. This is a recent read for me, and it's a fairly average size, to be honest, for an epic fantasy book. I think it was around 650 pages, which is sort of borderline getting into quite a big book, but also isn't the biggest epic fantasy that I've ever read. But it was one of the heartiest books that I have read in terms of how full and how complete it was by the end of it. This book is a standalone, and it is phenomenal for what it can achieve in one book, not a series, one book. We have excellent world building, we've got excellent characters, honestly, Masaki for president. We've got a cool magic system. There is really no part of this book that I felt was lacking. I think it was so well-rounded and extremely well executed that I'm going to put that as my answer for question 5. Moving right along, question 6, bread. Something you and your friends fight over while waiting for your dinner is the bread basket. Talk about a book you fight with other people about. Look, I don't really fight over books. I don't want to start beef, ironically, with anyone over books. People can read what they like. I'm not here to judge you for what you like to read. Read books that you enjoy. It's, that's what it's all about. It's to read for fun, go and enjoy your life, enjoy the books that you're reading. I'm not going to start anything over somebody's reading taste if it doesn't align with mine. The person I talk to the most about books is probably Mark Timoney, the author of Blood of the Spear that I mentioned earlier, who doesn't share all of my reading tastes. He is very big into epic fantasy and doesn't really like that softer side of fantasy that can be played with to have in my experience, quite an enjoyable read. But he hates some of the things that I read and can be vocal about it. But we don't argue. He's just like, I don't like that book. And I'll be like, all right, I did. And then we'll move on with our lives. What I will say is a series that I see people DNF quite often that I think really deserves the time of day is the Tide Child trilogy, which is written by R.J. Barker. I have seen so many people get to like halfway through this first book and put it down, and it hurts me every time because this series is so good. If you can get past this first book and get to the end of book 3, R.J. Barker really sticks the landing and just makes a fascinating nautical fantasy world. Underwater dragons, people. Underwater dragons. That's all I have to say about that. But I would implore people who have DNF'd this book to get through it. The audio books are really good. The narrator that was chosen to read these does bring a very nautical feel to the book, so maybe that's a different route that you could go down. Don't give up on the Tide Child trilogy, please. Question number 7. The Cheese Room, a book with a happy ever after ending. I like that people have said that a happy ever after ending is cheese. I like that. I enjoy cheese. I don't enjoy books with happy endings, apparently. I looked through my last 2 years of reading challenges on Goodreads, and there is not one happily ever after in there. I don't read books with a happy ending. I plan on reading Legends and Lattes at some point in the future. That may have a happy ending, but I don't know. I haven't delved into cozy fantasy yet, so I'm not completely sure. I apparently just have a heart of stone and don't read books with happy endings, so I'm gonna have to skip that one. Moving on to question 8, Chocolate Fountain. When you read a new series or author, do you dip in and out, or do you read it all back to back? Now, this for me personally can go either way. My memory is pretty good. Generally, I will remember a book if I don't pick up the next one in the series for months or even years. I'll sort of have a vague idea of what's happened in that first book. So I can be known just to read one and then come back to it months later, or even a year later, to pick up the next one in the series. I do, however, enjoy this trend of authors putting in a little recap in the next book in the series. I think that's quite nice, particularly for people who need a little bit of a jog to their memory, and sometimes I do too. Sometimes it's been a year and I'm like, oh, I vaguely know what's happened. A little bit of before you read would be nice to go into the next one, but I can just put a book down after the first and then come back to it many moons later. It does depend on how gripping the story is. So usually I would say I'm someone who dips in and out of a new author, but I have gotten addicted to series in the past and read them month after month after month. That's probably been the closest for me as to being a consistent reader, is I'll read one month, next book the next month, and so on and so forth. The two series that come to mind in terms of really not wanting to stop is the War Eternal series by Rob J. Hayes. I read that pretty quickly. All those books are around 300 to 350 pages, starting with Along the Razor's Edge, and I loved it. I was blown away by how much I loved Along the Razor's Edge, and then I picked up books 2 and 3 very quickly, and ironically have not read the 4th book yet because I'd finished the initial trilogy and then book 4 only came out this year. The other one that I am sort of addicted to now is The World of Lunaria by L.L. McRae, which I also mentioned earlier, and I finished book 1 last month, and book 2 was not on my radar, except I really enjoyed book 1 and had to know what happened next, so book 2 jumped onto my TBR this month, and I'm pretty sure book 3 is going to be on my TBR in August. So there are only 4 books out of 6 in that series, and I have a feeling that I will be caught up by the end of the year and waiting like everybody else for book number 5. The last question is who's invited. Let's tag some foodie friends. Now, I haven't been known to tag people in these, but I am going to today. So Lana from Laws and Lullabies, let's get you into the book buffet tag. Tag, you're it. Roger over at Rogers Reads, if you watch this one, you have been tagged. I look forward to watching your rendition of this, and also an erudite adventure. Hopefully I pronounced that one correctly. You have been tagged as well. All those channels will be linked down below if you do want to go and check them out. If you want to give this one a go and I haven't tagged you, please by all means do. I'll pop the questions down below if you want to give this one a red hot go. That's it from me today. If you like the content, give it one of these. If you want to see more of it, then click subscribe at your will, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.